Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with Arthur, where I waste my beans so you don't have to. And in today's video, we're going to do a deep dive comparison of the Olympia Cremina and the Pavoni Professional. So just to give you a little bit of background between this, so I bought the Olympia Cremina as my endgame espresso machine about a year ago, back in December of 2021. When I first saw the Olympia Cremina, I knew that this was the machine for me. This was gonna be the end game, the machine that I had been waiting for. And if you wanna see an in-depth review of that, you can check out my video that I posted about a year ago, doing a deep review of the Olympia Cremina. But as I was looking through the forums and I was experimenting, I was thinking, I really, it seems like the Pavoni, especially the Pavoni Professional and the Olympia Cremina, have a lot of similar details, and I saw that, the basic way of how they function is the same. It's just the Pavoni is a lot cheaper than the Cremina. And when I looked at some information on comparing the two, I couldn't really find a lot of good information. So for you guys, I decided to get a Pavoni Professional, and I've had it for about, 5 months now, 4 or 5 months now, and I've been using it almost every day. So I think I can share the benefits of the Pavoni versus the Cremina and the weaknesses of the Pavoni versus the Cremina. So in today's video, we're gonna go over the review in this order. First, we're gonna talk about the main cosmetic, the basic specifications, how they function, how they're different in that way. Then we're also going to, after that, get into how the experience of making coffee differs between the two of these machines. And then at the end, I'm gonna actually do a shot-by-shot comparison between the Pavoni and the Cremina, so you can see that. And at the end, I'm gonna share some feedback, some ideas to help you make the right decision of whether you wanna go with the Professional or you wanna go with the Cremina. So first, I wanna start by saying that neither machine is actually better than the other. They follow two completely different philosophies. I would say it's kind of similar to the difference between Mac versus PC. Apple makes very beautiful design, very high quality materials that are a lot more expensive than PC or regular stock PCs. And a lot of the PC crowd really criticizes Apple, saying there's an Apple tax, that it's way overpriced for the capabilities, and it's not as moddable as you can on PC. But that's not what Mac people want. They just want something that works and is beautiful to work with. And so I feel like the Pavoni really follows the PC philosophy and the Cremina follows the Mac philosophy. Now let's get into why. So first, let's go into the cosmetic differences. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are already aware of this, but this is a good place to start. So the biggest difference, at least in the look of these machines, is that the Pavoni has an exposed boiler and the Cremina does not have an exposed boiler. There's a casing around it. When I first got the Cremina, I really wanted to get it because it had a protective casing around it. I have a son and I don't want him to get burns. But when I started using this machine, I felt the front, and the front was really, really hot, and the group had got really hot too. I was thinking, man, this doesn't feel much different from having an exposed boiler. Well, when I got the Pavoni and I got this up to temperature, and I just finished an espresso machine. I finished an espresso and I went to take a rag to wipe it. Holy crap, my fingers got burned through the rag. This thing gets super hot. Another difference is the steam wand position. On the Pavoni, it's on the right side. On the Cremina, it's on the left side. On the Pavoni, the portafilter turns to the left. And so it's actually not that bad if you're a left-handed person, I think. On the Cremina, it turns to the right. But one thing that I've noticed is that on the Pavoni, there's a lot more give on the gasket on the group head. You can see I've turned this a lot farther than I have on this Cremina. Now granted, I just bought this maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I've had this for over a year, but there still isn't very much give on the Cremina. The seals are a lot tighter. Now I don't know how that's gonna impact espresso, but that's just something to be aware of. Another thing that's different is the drip tray. With the Pavoni Professional, you get this plastic drip tray that's pretty light, pretty cheap, and it's in a well in here. So it's really it's kind of difficult to pull it out, especially if this gets full with water. It's very easy to drip water from here. The capacity of this is not very much. I mean, in the end, once you get used to making espresso with these machines, you're not gonna use so much water. So for like 1 or 2 shots, it's not gonna be a big deal. But if you get to 3 or 4, it's gonna be a little bit a little bit of a hassle, I think. Now on the Cremina, we have this drip tray right here. Now this drip tray is made of stainless steel. It's a lot heavier, heftier, and it has a lot more space in here. So you actually can pull a lot more shots, put a lot more water in before you're gonna have to change it. Also, I just like the sound of this. Another thing to note is that on the Pavoni Professional, the base is actually a plastic, so it's very easy to move this. But on the Cremina, there are rubber legs, so it's actually harder to move this. That might also be because this is so much heavier, but yeah, it's harder to move this, I think. One thing that I like about the Pavoni is that the sight glass is on the side and it's very easy to see the water level in here. I don't like that it has this plastic casing around it. I don't want to get plastic. I don't want to deal with plastic. I like dealing with hefty materials, but it's a lot easier and convenient to see the sight glass here. You can see the water level. Whereas in the Cremina, it took me a little while to figure out tips on how to see this while I was pouring. And I'm gonna share that in an update video about my experience with the Cremina later. But you know, now I don't really have a problem, but in the beginning, it was difficult to see the water level in here. Another thing that I like about the Pavoni is the circlips up here in the group head on the rods right here. So one of the things that I'm really frustrated about with the Cremina is the circlips. They're very small, and if you take them off once, it's very easy for them to get warped, and then through regular use, sometimes they just fall off, and I've had some problems with that. But on the Pavoni, they're set inside the rods. There's no way that they're coming off. It's a lot more convenient that way, and it's a lot easier to keep the rods stationary, to keep the rods in the correct position. So you know, everybody knows this, I'm sure you know this, but the Cremina is built like a tank. There's a lot of stainless steel, very high quality parts. It's very heavy for pretty much the same size as the Pavoni, and it just feels like a higher quality machine. You know, you have the plastic drip tray here and you have the stainless steel drip tray here. But I find that using these high quality materials just makes it more fun, makes the experience more enjoyable for me. Now, some people may like the retro look of the Pavoni, and that's nice, but I feel like it's a little bit cheaper. It's a lot lighter. The materials are lighter, the portafilter is lighter. You have some plastic over here, and it's just not as enjoyable for me. I don't feel like it's as hefty, as strong as a build as the Cremina is. Now let's talk about the sounds. You know, one of the things I love about making espresso in the morning is the sound of the boiler starting up. It's part of that sensory experience that just helps me wake up and helps me enjoy the process more. So let's compare the sounds you hear when you start up the Pavoni and the Cremina. Let's first start with the Pavoni. And now let's do the Cremina. Now the startup times on both of these machines is roughly the same, about 10 to 15 minutes depending on how cold your water is when you turn on the boiler. But I really like the sensory, the sound experience that you get with the Cremina. I love the sound of the boiler cap when the steam pressure starts to build. And I love the sound of the light turning off when the boiler comes to pressure. You know, it's a very small sound, but when I'm in my living room and I'm starting this up and I'm focusing on something else, I can hear that sound and I know that it's ready. Whereas on the Pavoni, there's no sound like that. I just have to listen for the boiler to stop, and sometimes I forget that it's even on. One big thing for me is pulling the lever, which is a very different experience on the Pavoni and the Cremina. When you pull the lever on the Pavoni, especially when the boiler is up to pressure and there's a little bit of resistance, well, you know, it's a much lighter machine, and so you'll pull the whole machine up, When you pull the lever up, you have to put your hand on the boiler cap and you have to be careful that your fingers don't get burned, which isn't that difficult when you're focusing. But if you're focusing on steaming milk or focusing on making espresso, it's easy to burn your fingers in the beginning. But with the Cremina, it's so heavy, you don't need to have any sort of assistance. You just pull the lever up with one hand and it's just as simple as that. Now let's look at the group head flushes. The Cremina idles at a higher boiler temperature, at a higher pressure than the Pavoni, and so I expected that the flush would be stronger on the Cremina than the Pavoni, but I was a bit surprised at the results. Now these were both done when the machine was very, very hot, so you can see a lot of steam coming about, but you can easily see that the Cremina has a lot more power behind the flush. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll let you decide that. One thing that's really different is touching the machine, moving the machine, and using the power button actually. On the Pavoni, the power button is very close to the base of the boiler. It's on the hottest part of the base. After you've pulled a couple shots, the whole base in general gets pretty hot, but near the back where the boiler is seated, it gets really hot. And so when you go to turn off the button, there was actually a time when I slipped and I also touched the base. It was really, really hot. But on the Cremina, the base is cool. I can turn off the button, no worries. I can even move the machine right after I've pulled a shot because the base is not that hot to the touch. It's a lot safer of a machine. All right, now let's talk about steam power. On the Cremina, you know, the base idling pressure of the boiler is higher, so there's gonna be more steam power there. And stock, the Cremina comes with a 4-hole steam tip. On the Pavoni, it comes with a 3-hole steam tip. One thing I've noticed is that the steam on the Cremina is actually wetter than the steam on the Pavoni. And so because of that, you're gonna get more water coming out when you're clearing the steam wand when you first turn it on. Let's look at a side-by-side comparison. One thing that's important to note is that for the Cremina to go on to full steam power, you only need to make one rotation on the steam knob, whereas on the Pavoni, you have to do a few rotations. And that's really important when it comes to steaming milk. Let me tell you why. So let's talk about the experience of steaming milk on the Cremina and the Pavoni. And I gotta tell you, I hate steaming milk on the Pavoni. Now, why is that? Well, it's because on the Pavoni, the steam wand is mobile. You can actually move it. And so when I go to steam milk, if I'm not careful and I put too much pressure from the milk pitcher onto the steam wand, I move the steam wand up and it messes up the foam. Now I could get more steady hands or I could find something to rest the milk pitcher on, but it's just a hassle for me. Most of the time when I'm steaming on the Pavoni, I rest the milk pitcher on here on the steam release valve, this one right here. It kind of gives a little bit of grounding. But on the Cremina, the wand is stationary and I can just rest the milk pitcher on the steam wand and it's very easy to get a very steady, even flow of steam into it. It's very easy to maneuver. And this is where the steam knob comes into play too. After I've steamed the milk as much as I need to, you need to turn the steam off, right? Well, on the Cremina, it's very fast, just one rotation and you're off. But on the Pavoni, I have to do a couple of rotations. And so I'm holding the pitcher in one hand and I'm focusing on turning the knob with the other hand, trying to not get my hand burned. And I almost always mess up the milk. I put in too much air at the end and it creates a decent cappuccino foam, but it's really difficult for me to get that nice micro foam for a latte or for a macchiato or some other kind of milk drink like that. It's gotten to the point where my wife knows whether I've made a coffee on the Cremina versus the Pavoni just by looking at the milk. Now, if you guys have some tips on how to make good milk, good steam milk on the Pavoni, please let me know in the comments below because it's been 4 months and I'm still having issues. Now, what about the taste? Well, to be honest, you can get the same tasting espresso on a Pavoni and a Cremina, but I find that it's a lot easier on the Cremina to pull better tasting shots. Well, let's look at a walkthrough video, a side-by-side comparison of the experience of using both of these machines. So when you put the portafilter in the Pavoni, you should raise the lever halfway through to prevent any sort of suction. I've never really felt like I needed to do that on the Cremina, so I never did. And then, of course, the distance between the drip tray and the portafilter is about the same. That's pretty much the same experience. When you lift the lever, you know, on the Pavoni, you have to push your hand down. Now, one thing I want to say is on this extraction, I overstuffed the baskets on purpose because I wanted to see how each machine handles overdosing. And you can see on the Cremina, it's coming out a bit smoother. I mean, a little bit smoother. But after a little while, both of them got to steady streams. You can see there's a bit more channeling and dripping on the Pavoni. Now, one big thing for me was at the end when we reached our target extraction on the Cremina, I can just slide out the tray and I can take the cup off. But on the Pavoni, I can't do that, and so I end up dripping on the scale every single time. So, well, how was the taste? Well, on both, they had very similar body, very rich, full bodies that I really, really like. But on the Pavoni, there was a little bit of a harshness, a little bit of a bitterness, and a little bit of an almost vegetal under extraction that I kind of had both of those tastes in at once, which is very indicative of channeling, uneven extraction, and it just didn't handle very well on here. Now, what about the Cremina? Well, it was a bit over extracted. I definitely did get a bitterness and a little bit of that harsh bitterness from it, but I didn't get that under extracted kind of vegetal taste from this. Of course, that could just be my confirmation bias, who knows? The Cremina handles overstuffing the basket, having too high of a dose, much easier than the Pavoni. When I overstuff the basket, I have a lot of problems. I get a lot of channeling, things don't come out as well. It's a lot harder to work with. Maybe it's because the base boiler pressure is higher on the Cremina and it pushes the water through a little bit harder. I don't know, but I feel like the espresso comes out faster, comes out smoother on the Cremina. Because the base boiler pressure of the Pavoni is lower, that means the water temperature is lower. And I find that it's easier to under extract on the Pavoni and it's easier to over extract on the Cremina. But on the Cremina, because you have a higher pressure and you push the coffee through faster, even though it's at a higher temperature, it tends to balance out a lot easier. And with the whole lever action thing on the Pavoni, I always have to keep my hand at the top to make sure it doesn't tip over. But on the Cremina, I don't really have to worry about that so much as long as I stay under 9 bars. Now, here's the question, which one should you get? Which one is the one that's right for you? Well, in the end, only you can decide that, but let me share with you my 2 cents. So I really think that depending on your philosophy in life, either the Pavoni or the Cremina is better for you. Like I said, you can get the same espresso taste on both of them. It's just about how you go about them. Like I shared before, you know, it's very much like a PC versus Mac issue, and I feel like the PC people would be more interested in the Pavoni. Why is that? Well, it's cheaper. There's a lot more mods and parts available for it at a lower price. It's a lot easier to mod and adjust. You can really tinker with it and really make it your own. That's not to say you can't do that on the Cremina, but it's just the Pavoni is a much more ubiquitous machine and so parts are more readily available. If you're okay with having a little bit more of a finicky machine and you just want to focus on straight espresso, or you just really make a cappuccino, you don't really focus on making great microfoam, then I would say the Pavoni is a good option for you. But I think the Cremina is more for the Mac crowd. And why is that? Well, of course you can tinker with it, but the Cremina just works. It's great in its own stock state with no modifications. It just works. And for that, you do pay a hefty premium, but with that premium, what do you get? You get a solid build, very high quality craftsmanship on this machine. It's a delight to work with. There's a lot more flexibility. You don't have to worry about dosing correctly so much. You can just kind of react with the machine. It's a lot more flexible. And if you really like milk drinks and you want to focus on getting nice microfoam, well, it's a lot easier on the Cremina, and so the Cremina would be right for you. So I gotta tell you guys, I'm really excited that I made this video because finally I can sell this Pavoni, get some of my money back, and I can just focus on having this machine again, because honestly, I was worried that maybe I could have done okay with the Pavoni, but after using the Cremina and then going to the Pavoni, it's no contest. For me, I love this machine so much. Yeah, it's way more expensive, but this is the machine that I wanted, and just using this confirmed my decision that this was the machine for me. Anyways, I hope that guys that this video was useful for you. If you have any other questions about using a Pavoni versus a Cremina, please let me know in the comment box below. I don't think I can make any more comparison videos because I'm gonna sell this one pretty soon. But just let me know and I'll be happy to answer your questions. And as always, thanks for watching and I can't wait to see you in the next video.